Yeah. Uh, I had a dream, and it was a sweet dream. I was stood in the middle of a field, and in the dream, it was clear that actually this was my field. I'd worked it every day. This was my crop. It was a hard ground. It was full of stones and rubble, but I'd been there for a while. This was my daily chore. And as I was stood there and I was raking at the ground and throwing the stones into a pile ready to take away, I lifted my head from the earth and looked up towards a group of trees, a line of trees that was off in the distance in my field. And for the first time, I realized that there was a wall behind the trees. It was a large wall. It was just peeking over the top of the trees. And it surprised me that I hadn't seen it before. And in the wall, in between the trees, as I was looking at the wall, I saw a door open. And out of the door stepped a man. And he strode across a brook that was just this side of the trees and started walking towards me in my field. I was a bit unsure. He was dressed in finery and silks, and I was in my dirty work clothes from the farm, and I kept my head down in the dream. I remember just sort of scraping along at the ground, and this man came closer and closer until finally he was stood in front of me, just looking at where I was raking on the ground. And he didn't say anything initially. And eventually I lifted my eyes and looked at him. And he looked at me and he said, "John Allen?" And I responded, "Yes." And he said, "I've been sent with an invitation. You need to put down your rake and come with me." He said, "There's an invitation from the king to come and sit in his garden." I was quite taken aback, and I looked at him and I looked round him at the door, looked up at the trees and just at the tip of the trees to see the wall. And I looked back down at the ground, laying my fork on the ground and began to walk with him. We didn't say anything. We walked across the field in this stillness, and we jumped across the brook and went through the door. And as I stepped through the door and he closed the door behind me, I looked up at this amazing scene I could see before me. And it was meadow after meadow with trees and beautiful little secret gardens and flowers and just amazing image. And I could see up to the horizon the blue skies. And on top of the mountain that was before me, I could see a castle. And this man said to me, "The king has asked for you to come and sit and be with him as he addresses his subjects." So this chap led me through the trees and led me along this path and over these small hills and dales, and we came to stop in what I can only describe as like an amphitheatre of banked grass. And in the front of this banked grass was a stone collection of thrones. And he sat me down in front of the throne that was in the middle, this stone throne, up against the arm on the right-hand side of the chair. And he sat me down on the floor with my back against this stone throne, and his instructions were quite clear. He said, "Don't move." He said, "Many will come, many will sit in front of you, many will sit behind you, but the king will come and sit on the seat. And you don't look up, you don't look at him, you don't say anything, you just sit." And I said, "Okay, I understand." I didn't really understand. So they began to come, and one by one there were legions of armies of different flags and different colours, and in front of me, in front of these thrones, they began to take position, and the leader would sit in the front, and then his front rank soldiers would sit behind him, and then all of his subordinates and slaves and servants would sit behind him. And they were sectioned off in this whole area, the panoramic of what I could see, were all of these armies. And they sat down and took their place. And as they took their place, they began to communicate and talk left to right. And some of them knew each other, so you know, sort of hi king, and these conversations were going on. And I'm a bit of rough, you know. I'm a Valleys boy. I don't know king from king, so I'm sat there and I'm listening to these conversations, but it's way over my pay grade. It's way over my understanding, and I'm just sat on the chair. And as I'm sat on the chair, this music begins to just play behind me, and it's a melodic. There's trumpets, there's harps, there's all sorts going on. It's just a tune of the day. It's a tune of the sunshine. It's a tune of awareness of the presence, is the only way I can describe it. And as this tune is playing, these seats to my left and to my right, they're beginning to fill up. And these seats are filled with the most amazing looking warriors, is the only way I can describe them. Dressed from head to foot in silver and gold. Their armor is carved intricately, very elaborately, with images and pictures and words all over their armor. And although I'm just seeing it out of my peripheral because my eyes are looking ahead, I can see that some have got wings that are sort of wrapped around them, almost like folded warriors in front of them. Other wing is behind them, so they've got two sets of wings. And you know, we know the sort of the analogies or the pictures that are drawn to us about angels. But this was sort of swords coming out of the top from the rear, but they were just creatures of immense strength and peace all across either side of this throne room. And the musicians changed. They changed from this lovely melodic music of the day to anticipation. It raises. There's a beat that's come about. It's raised and it's heightened, and as it's heightened, it turns into a triumphant call, an announcement of the arrival of the king. And as this trumpet is going, my eyes are down on the ground, and you know, this fear, this anticipation is filling the air, and there's a hush has just overtaken everybody. There's silence, but in the silence, you can hear peace approaching. I can't describe it as anything else than peace is approaching. Presence is approaching. Oh, so I'm sat there back against this stone throne, this huge arm part of the throne, and I'm conscious that this robe just sort of envelops the whole of the area where I'm sitting, and my hands are held in front of my chest. And this throne just is encompassed by this huge robe of glistening white. It's shimmering with a translucence that is it's like pearls. It's like a it's like the white of a pearl that's touched by the light, with all of the different fragmented colors that make up this white within that white itself. And that's the cloth that this thing makes up. And this person, this king, sits on their throne, and as they sit on their throne, and the robes seep out across the ground, it's like they're liquid, and they envelop everything, and they're brushing against my leg, and they're warm, and you want to clothe yourself in this robe. And as I'm sat there in this chair and the king has taken his place, all of a sudden, I'm just aware of this hand. This hand just comes and touches my head. And his fingers are just, they're beating gently as the trumpets come to an end in a crescendo. Oh, it's exciting! My eyes are on the ground. I'm not looking up. My eyes are wide with the fact that this hand has touched my head. And it feels so good. It feels like the calm, cold touch on a fevered brow. Oh, that's such a good description. And he's just playing with my hair. And I didn't realise till the end of the dream, but now I tell it as part of the realisation. But as his hand is on my head, playing with my hair, I have hair. And it's wonderful. So this king is there, he's sat on his throne, he's playing with my head, but his attention is on the kings that are before him. And he welcomes them. And he welcomes them with a voice that comes up from my feet. I feel it in the ground before I feel it in my head and my ears. I feel it coming through the ground. And this voice is the voice of peace and thunder. It commands respect. It commands stillness. So love this dream. And everybody is in awe. And I can see in front of me, I can see all the kings, I can see all of their servants, their warriors. They're all agog, just looking on with such delight and love and passion. This king is their king. This king is their love. This king is their captain. This king is their commander in chief. And they wait on every word that comes from his mouth. They look on the angels and warriors next to him for the nods of approval in agreement to every word that comes out of his mouth. And it's amazing. It's like music and joy and passion and peace, and every beautiful morsel of every food that you've ever touched, and every smell that has ever inspired, every rose that has brushed your nose is in his voice. And as I'm sat there leaning against the arm of his throne, I take in every thought, every feeling, every love, every compassion, every joy. Everything that he's saying is just so encouraging. So encouraging. Some of the kings, some of the tribes, some of the warriors have gone through battles so dire. And they've come battle weary, and they're receiving great words of inspiration and encouragement and passion and faith and fire that's stirring them, and their faces are turning to joy, anticipation, encouragement, zeal, fire, strength, joy. And I'm listening to these words and I'm seeing the reaction on the kings. And as he's encouraging, he's empowering. As he's empowering, he's instructing. As he's instructing, he's infusing, directing. He's giving wisdom in the outworking of their command, in their region, in their zone, to be able to take down the enemy. And it's the most incredible thing I've ever listened to. It's glorious. And all the time, he's playing with the hairs on my head. And I'm loving it so much. It all comes to a very gentle, peaceful end with his final words that leave so much encouragement, so much inspiration, so much joy, so much foundation, so much strength. And he nods to each king of each region, of each army. And they nod back with that knowing nod. And one by one, from the outside in, each tribe stands and begins to make their way off the field, until all in front of me is completely empty, back to meadows, trees, flowers. And without a word, all of the array of warriors and angelic hosts stand and bow to the throne and leave. And then I'm aware that I'm just sat at the throne with my king with his hand on my head. And all he said to me was, "You know I love you. Would you come again?" And as his hand comes from my head, he's gone. I'm sat there in awe. And the man that had come and brought me from my field came again, took my hand, raised me to my feet, gently, quietly walked back over to the gate in the wall, opened the gate, walked me back to the place where my rake was. And as he picked up the rake and put it into my hands, I know who he is. I see the holes in his hand. And I know who he is. And he took my hand, took his hand and put it on my face. And he said, "Next time." Next time. And just walked away. Back to the door, closed it, stood there, rake in my hands. Beautiful dream. And I know with everything in me that Father God wants to give us wisdom, direction, love, compassion, equipping, training, beyond anything we've ever thought of or dreamt of. And all he needs is for us to say yes when the invitation comes.